Hello, I'm Kate. In today's video, I'm going to be making a top using this sewing pattern called the Bonnie Top by the Good Murph. I think this is the perfect project to make in time for spring, so feel free to sew along with me. I've linked the pattern below. This is a PDF pattern which I printed at home on A4 paper and assembled. Here I am cutting out my thrifted fabric. The first step is making the collar. I'm adding this lace trim, which is optional. If you do want to add a trim, you have to pin it to the right side of the collar like this. And the corner is kind of tricky, and I don't feel like the instructions were very helpful. So just do your best, and you can always unpick it and make it neater. I pinned it slightly in from the edge as it needs a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I didn't want it to take up too much of the lace trim. So just be aware of where the stitch line is going to fall on your trim. Once you've got your trim all pinned on, then add the second collar piece on top facing down and pin that as well. So your trim is sandwiched in between the two. Then take this to the sewing machine and sew it at 1/2 inch. And then turning it inside out and going over it with the top stitch. And here's what the collar looks like. Exciting. Next up is to finish the 3 edges of your ruffle pieces, either with an overlocker or a zigzag stitch. These pieces are then gathered by sewing 2 lines with a long stitch length and not back stitching. Now we gather these pieces until they match the measurement in the pattern. Next, I'm pinning 1/2 inch over on one side of each front ruffle piece. Next up is to sew the front and back yoke pieces together. And here I'm just pressing the seam to the back. You do that with both sets of yokes. Then choose one set of these yokes to be your lining and fold up 1/2 inch on the bottom of all of these pieces and press that. Now it's time to attach your gathered pieces to the top yoke, the outer yoke, not the lining. Time for a little try on. It doesn't look like much now, but we're trusting the process. Here I'm making the 4 ties, which are just a strip of fabric folded over twice and then sewn. And now it's sleeve time. Sew 2 sleeve pieces together along this edge. Then use another gather stitch to gather the top of the sleeve until it matches the armhole, like I'm doing here. Then we hem the bottom of the sleeve, as well as creating a little channel for the elastic. You need elastic that's about 1/2 inch wide. I think mine was slightly thinner, so that's fine. And then we feed it through the channel with a safety pin. And I put a big safety pin at the other end to make sure that it couldn't pull all the way through. Then I'm tacking both ends with a few stitches just to hold that elastic in place. And there we go, stretchy puffy sleeves. So lay out the outer bit of your top, right side facing up, and then you can place your collar where it needs to be, also facing up. And then put your ties in place. There should be little notches that you've marked from the pattern. and make sure they're facing inwards. Now take your lining piece and lay that on top so that it matches up with right sides facing, and pin all along that neckline. And then we sew through all of those layers. Here I'm trying to figure out how to attach the sleeves, which is slightly confusing, but just read it slowly and double check that everything's facing the right way and you'll get there. So you should be pinning the sleeve right side facing right side of the outer top. Then put the lining back in place, sandwiching your sleeve in there. And stitch through all 3 layers with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, once they're on, it's time to flip your top inside out. This has been made with something called the burrito method. So again, this is kind of confusing because there's just so much fabric and it's hard to tell what goes where, but yeah, again, we trust the process. Give it all a good press once you've got it inside out. And we are nearly there. So the next step is to cover this stitching by sewing the lining with the folded edge you did earlier. Sew that down just over the stitch line. Finally, we can sew the sides closed and then finish them off however you like. And the last step is to just hem the bottom and the front by folding it over once 1/2 inch. I'm finishing mine off by adding my label, which is one of my favourite parts. And here is the finished top. I think although there are some more complex bits, the pattern is written and illustrated in a way that makes it quite easy to follow. So I do think a confident beginner could tackle this. I think there are so many fun fabric and colour combos and trim combos you could use for this, so I'm excited to make some more. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more sewing and crafty videos coming soon.